After the end of the world came winter and all the zombies froze. Hello all. This is Jacobson and this is a brief retelling of the 15th and 16th episodes of the 9th season of the zombie series The Walking Dead. You can see the previous episodes at the links in the video description. As soon as this video gets 300 likes, I will release the next part. Also leave your comments, it will help promote the video. Have fun watching it.
In a flashback, a man and a woman find their way to Hilltop and quickly join society. Years later, they make some crafts and get into a cart to go to a fair in the kingdom. In the forest, they are ambushed and killed by an alpha, who then removes the woman's scalp. In the kingdom, he addresses the crowd and declares that they have finally realized Rick, Carl and Jesus' dream of reuniting communities. While everyone is celebrating, Daryl, Michonne and the convoy are staying. Carol scolds Henry for running away, and Michonne greets Ezekiel, who is shocked to see her. Carol and are surprised at how much Judith has grown, and Tara notices Lydia among them. Inside the theater, Michonne gathers the leaders and tells them that she is finally ready to help Alexandria. Gabriel announces that Alexandria is ready to grant Lydia asylum. They all agree to send some of them to the Hilton to protect them from possible attacks by the Whisperers, and Michonne decides to restore the charter, establishing that an attack on the Hilton is considered an attack on everyone. Then he takes out the original charter. Odora and Michonne finally reconcile. They all sign the charter, and Michonne tells Gabriel that he should sign for Alexandria as the head of the council. At the fair, everyone is happy to sell goods, learn survival lessons, play carnival games and have fun. Michonne informs Sadiq that she is going to go to Hilltop with the first group, and he tells her that he has news that he will tell her when they all return to Hilltop. Daryl, Carol, Michonne, Magna and others leave the kingdom to go to Hilltop and leave some soldiers there in case of a possible attack. In the forest, they meet Ozzy, Alec and DJ and find Hilltop's cart overturned, but without bodies. Carol, Daryl, Michonne and Yumika decide to look for possible traces of survivors while Magna and the others go to Hilltop, and Ozzy and his group patrol the outskirts of the kingdom. At night, Daryl and his groups are attacked by walkers. They destroy them one by one until they are surrounded by Whisperers. Beta appears from behind the trees and tells them to drop their weapons. Memories of what happened earlier that day, Alpha changes into Hilda's clothes and goes to the fair. Meanwhile, Eugene tells Rosita that he has collected radio components to facilitate the communication of communities among themselves. Rosita tells him that, despite her pregnancy, nothing should change between them, and they are still friends. Elsewhere, Henry assures Lydia that he likes her. They kiss, and he leaves to check the pipes, asking her to leave him a place in the cinema. Nearby, Ezekiel meets an alpha in disguise. She introduces herself as Deborah from Alexandria and asks him to show her around. Later in the movie, Lydia worries that Henry hasn't returned yet. Suddenly, Alpha sits down next to her and quietly tells her to be quiet. Later that night, Alpha, now without disguise, approaches Daryl and the group tied to a tree. Wiping the bloody knife on her pants, she tells them that she ran into trouble on the road. Michonne warns her that if she tries to get Lydia back, they will respond with force, but Alpha assures her that Lydia is no longer interested in her. She pulls out a shotgun and tells Daryl to go with her alone. At dawn, Alpha forces Daryl to climb to the top of a cliff overlooking a ravine, where a huge horde of walkers and Whisperers walks under them. Alpha tells Daryl that his community, it's a joke and that her lifestyle is better for her people. She then tells him that his friends in the camp are fine, but the next time his people cross her land, she will unleash a horde on them. She clarifies that she marked the border, and Daryl asks if she killed Lydia. Flashbacks to the previous night, Alpha asks Lydia about being a traitor, but she tells her that this is the best way to live. Then she threatens to scream if she doesn't leave, and Alpha tells her that she was never one of them. Lydia breaks down in tears when Alpha leaves. Returning to the present, Alpha tells Daryl that she did not kill Lydia, and doubts that he will be able to protect her. He tells her she's wrong and leaves. At the Beta camp, he asks about Lydia. I want to be alone, the Alpha orders him, but the Whisperer accidentally witnesses her crying. She stabs him in the neck so that no one knows her weakness. Returning to the kingdom, Daryl, Michonne, Carol and Yumika find Siddiq beaten and bloodied, tied to a tree. He points them to a nearby hill, in the ground of which 10 spades are stuck. A severed head is impaled on the top of each peak. The group goes to him devastated and looks in horror at the victims: Ozzy, Alec, DJ, Frankie, Tammy, Rodney, Eddie, Ennett, Tara and Henry. When Daryl sees Henry's head, he rushes to Carol to prevent her from seeing it, but it's too late. He comforts Carol and tells her to look at him, but she is overwhelmed with emotion. Later, in the kingdom, Siddiq addresses the crowd to break the tragic news. He tells them that the Alpha left him alive so that he would tell the story of the evil that happened and tear the communities apart again. Instead, Siddiq tells a completely different story. Just before the end, the prisoners were found by Ozzy, Alec and DJ, who gave them a chance to fight back. The prisoners fought to the end, protecting each other as a family, although some of them did not even know each other. Although they were defeated in the end, they died heroes, and this is how Siddiq wants them to be remembered and honored. After a while, Daryl and Lydia return to the border. Lydia leaves the necklace that Henry made for her on the ground near the peak that once held his head, and when they leave, it starts snowing. A few months after the Fairground massacre, the kingdom fell into disrepair due to burst pipes, rotting and fires that engulfed many buildings throughout the kingdom. Meanwhile, Carol is sorting through Henry's old things, and Daryl is serving Lydia a plate of dinner. Inside the theater, Illinois looks longingly at the charter of the community, after which he collects his things and leaves. Outside, the remaining members of the kingdom gather and head out into the cold weather to take shelter in the hilltop, leaving the community behind. On the way, Yumika informs Michonne that they have sent letters to Maggie, but have not received a response, and Hilltop is still going through the loss of another leader. Suddenly they notice walkers in the field, and Alden asks Lydia if these are her people. Lydia tells him, "I don't want to cause any more trouble," but Daryl reminds her that people should stop blaming her. Later, when it gets colder, Daryl reminds Carol that Henry wanted Lydia to be with them. She admits that she only sees Henry when he looks at her, and Daryl asks what she sees when she looks at him. She assures him that she sees only him and puts her hand on his shoulder. And Ezekiel notices this and feels uncomfortable. Suddenly, Jerry warns him that they need to find shelter before the storm hits. In Alexandria, Eugene, Gabriel, Rosita discuss that the city will be divided into 3 groups, which will take refuge in Aaron's house, Barbara's house, and the meeting house, since there are the largest fireplaces in the city. At the meeting house, Gabriel and Rosita are warming up. Gabriel comes up with a plan to group around the large fireplaces in the church, and realizes that they will have to release Negan from the cell so that he does not freeze. On the road, Daryl and Carol kill a couple of walkers. Meanwhile, Lydia wanders into the forest and finds a walker stuck in the ice. Crying, she takes off her glove and offers her hand to the walker to commit suicide, but stops when Carol appears and follows her back to the group. When the snow begins to fall, Michonne decides to take the group to an abandoned shelter. Returning to Alexandria, the residents take refuge in the church. Negan jokes about Rosita's love quadrangle and taunts Gabriel, calling him father not father, to Eugene's amusement. Judith tells him that she is worried about the dog she lost, despite the fact that Daryl asked her to look after him. Suddenly, the group smells something, and Eugene pulls Siddiq and Gabriel away from the fireplace before it explodes. He says it's not safe to set fire to anything else because of the chimney, so Gabriel decides they're moving into the Domrona. They all tie a rope around themselves and go into a blizzard. Everyone in the shelter is trying to keep warm. Daryl is sitting with Carol, and she asks him if something happened there between him and Ezekiel. He says no, but Carol has suspicions. She admits that with Henry's departure, it seems to her that she is losing herself again, so Daryl offers to take Lydia and protect her himself, although he does not want to leave. Some time later, the leaders plot their route through a frozen lake on Alpha Land, and Michonne warns that they need to leave, otherwise they won't make it. After that, Ezekiel laments his failures with Michonne, who says that if their communities knew each other better, Alpha would never be able to blend in with them. She swears that she will never let them separate again. The group gathers and leaves the shelter. In the forest, the group passes into the territory of the Whisperers. Meanwhile, in Alexandria, Judith hears a dog barking in the distance and, letting go of the rope, runs after him, and Negan rushes after her. Back in the forest, Michonne kills the frozen walkers, not knowing if they are whisperers or not, before reaching the frozen lake. Daryl notices that Lydia has disappeared again, so Carol goes in search of her and instructs him to transport everyone safely. Suddenly, walkers appear from the snow rubble, and the group kills them one by one before running across the ice. Meanwhile, Carol searches for Lydia at the cabin and asks what she is doing. Lydia explains that she can't cross the river because going to Hilltop won't fix anything, and believes that everyone will blame her for what happened anyway. "Your son is dead because of me," she says, and asks Carol to kill her. Lydia presents the spear to her neck and says that this way she guarantees that they will not lose anyone else. Carol decides to do this, but stops and kills the walker instead. "You're not weak," Carol says before taking her back to the group. Elsewhere, Negan falls under the rubble while searching for Judith. He shouts her name until he hears the dog barking and finds her. Negan puts Judith on his shoulder, takes the dog's leash and gives her his coat to keep her warm. Then he bandages his wounded leg and takes her and the dog away. In the morning, when the storm is over, the group finally stays at Hilltop, where Daryl cuts off the head of a frozen walker. That evening, Daryl informs Lydia that they will leave for Alexandria in the morning. She asks why he left the Hilltop, and he replies that he will tell her the story another time. Meanwhile, Carol tells Azael that she is going to leave him and go to Alexandria with the others. He reminds her that he will always love her, and she says she will never regret this fairy tale. She returns the ring to him, but Ezekiel allows her to keep it for herself. The next morning, Michonne, Daryl and the others return to Alexandria along with Carol and several refugees from the kingdom. Michonne hugs her children and they play snowballs. Later, she goes to the infirmary to visit Negan. She thanks him for saving Judith, and he notices that the last time they were there, Rick had just slit his throat. He praises her for daring to cross the territory of the Whisperers. At their camp, Beta tells Alpha that the time spent away has benefited the pack. Alpha reminds him that she needs to be strong for what comes next, and Beta assures her that it will be. Then she hands him a stick, with which he hits her on the arm. At the Hilltop, Illinois talks to Judith on the radio and says that if they have lost their home, it does not mean that they have lost it forever. They disconnect from the radio, and he leaves. Suddenly another voice is heard asking if anyone is there. "Is there anyone alive there?"